So there's three major cities in the coast of Lebanon. One is being alluded to, and the other two are being mentioned explicitly. And Gval is an interesting city because the ancient city of Gval, I'm looking for it here on the map. Let's see.
Where's Gval mentioned?
Well, it's mentioned throughout the Tanakh.
Okay.
But the point is, okay, so it's 40 kilometers, so like 32 miles north of Beirut. Is they call it today Jbel, but it was a major Phoenician city on the border of Lebanon.
Oh, okay.
And so we have three Phoenician cities that are two are mentioned explicitly, Sor and Sidon. Sor is called Tyre, and that's actually the Greek name. In modern times, the Arabs still call it Sor, which I'm sure I'm mispronouncing. And then Sidon is in Arabic. Let's see. I think it's just Sidon or Sidon or something like this. Yeah. Oh, it's called Sida or Saida. Saida is Sidon.
And it's a real place today.
Yeah. Sor and Sidon are still, Tyre and Sidon are major cities in Lebanon.
On the coast.
On the coast, right? And they were major merchant powers in ancient times.
Oh.
So Tyre is possibly up until, let's say, early modern times, would have been the greatest trading empire the world had ever seen.
So it was a superpower.
It was a trading superpower, Tyre in particular. Tyre was known for their merchant vessels that went as far as Ireland.
Wow.
Now imagine that. These are merchant vessels that are being rowed by hand by hundreds of people who are rowing by hand. And because they didn't have the technology, if the wind was against you, you were kind of out of luck.
Oh.
So that's it. You go with the rowing. And they had merchant vessels that reached all the way to Ireland. The Greeks called them the Phoenicians. You've heard of the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians didn't call themselves Phoenicians. The Phoenicians called themselves Canaanites. The Greeks called them Phoenicians.
I see.
And so the Canaanites were
We've heard of those.
We've heard of the Canaanites.
We have.
And we usually think about the Canaanites who lived in what's today Israel.
Right.
That we fought against when we came into the land in 3500 BCE. So if you say that Israel is a imperialist conquering power, well, maybe not imperialist. If you say we're foreign conquerors, okay. Show me another country where the inhabitants were there 3,500 years ago and we can have a conversation, right? I mean, no, think about it. There's not that many countries in the world.
No, that's a long time.
Were the Turks in Turkey 3,500 years ago? No, the Turks weren't there 2,000 years ago, let alone 3,500 years ago. They conquered it from the Greeks. When we came into the land, we dealt with the Canaanites, but there were Canaanites that we never conquered because they were kind of far off. They were in Tyre and Sidon. And they were also they were separated from Israel by mountains, right? So there are these mountains in southern Lebanon that it's pretty hard to conquer, and it's kind of not worth the effort. And it would require being a great naval power, which ancient Israel never really was.
Right.
When they finally did have a naval presence, King Solomon built ships with the help of the Tyrians, right? So there was Hiram of Tyre who helped him build, because he didn't know anything about boats. He didn't have people who were trained on boats. So they had the Phoenicians or the Canaanites of Tyre help them. Now, so Tyre and Sidon are playing a part here in Zechariah 9:2, alongside Hamat and maybe the city of Gval, which when it says Hamat will be bordered in it, it's a play on words with Gval. By the way, Gval, which is in Greek, it was called Byblos. And they were famous in the ancient Greek world for making books.
Oh.
And the ancient Greek word for a book was Biblia.
Bible?
And Bible literally just originally meant book.
Oh, wow.
But it was part of a phrase that meant holy book, right? And so literally, Gval, because they were so famous for making books, is where we get the word Bible from, because it was called Biblos in Greek.
So if we're talking about Tyre, they went as far as Ireland, but didn't they also have colonies like
all over the Mediterranean? The city of Marseille was founded by the Tyrians.
Wow.
Right? I mean, we think of that as a French city, but before the French invaders came, no, really, the French are foreign invaders who conquered Gaul
it's true.
from the indigenous population. And right, they were Franks. They actually conquered it from the Romans, not from the indigenous population, who had conquered it from the Gauls. But southern France was colonized originally by the Tyrians, by the people of Sorf, of Tyre, and in Marseille in particular was a colony they established. And then when they came to Spain, they saw rabbits there, and they called Spain the land of the rabbits. Now, here's something
what is that word?
Here's something we have to know about the Phoenicians, about the Canaanites. The Canaanites spoke a language very similar to Hebrew. In fact, there are words that if you write them out in Hebrew letters, they're essentially Hebrew.
Oh, wow.
And now, you have to put in vowels because the way they spelled it was a little bit differently. And the way they pronounced it might have been very different. We don't know. Mm-hmm. We have no idea how they pronounced it. We actually have some Roman sources that transcribe Canaanite-Phoenician words. But those are in a relatively late period. And then when a foreigner hears something, he doesn't always write it down correctly. So take those with a grain of salt. If you looked at the names of some of the Phoenician Canaanite rulers, you would say, oh, those are Hebrew names.
Oh.
So for example, who's the most famous Phoenician or Canaanite in all of history?
Hannibal.
That's only because I told you that, right?
That's the only reason I know.
Hannibal Barca. Okay.
It's somewhere in my notes.
Yeah. So Hannibal
is elephants.
Right. So he came with elephants famously, Hannibal invaded Italy with elephants, and they died crossing over the Alps. Most of the elephants, maybe all the elephants, I don't remember. And a lot of his men died as well. So, the Phoenicians, or the Canaanites, they have this guy named Hannibal. And what is Hannibal in their language? He was called Hannibal. And Hannibal is actually just the name Hananiah, but for the religion of the Canaanites. So Hananiah means Jehovah has grace, has mercy. And there's a related name in Hebrew, which is Hananel. God has mercy. El has mercy.
Okay.
But if you worship Baal, then you're Hannibal. Baal has... No, that's something. That's Zerubbabel. That's okay. Unrelated. Hannibal means Baal has mercy.
Okay.
Right? So why is that a Hebrew name? Because the Phoenicians spoke a language that was very similar to Hebrew. Why is for a different discussion.
So, but you were saying that they had rabbits in Spain.
Right. And so when they came to Spain, they called it Eretz, and they didn't know what rabbits were, but they had an animal similar to rabbits in the land of Canaan, which is called a hyrax in modern times.
Oh, I have videos of those.
They're really cute little guys, and they kind of chew on stuff like the rabbit, like that little chewing, and it's described in the Torah as chewing its cud. What they're actually chewing is, can I say it? They poop and then they eat their poop.
I don't want to know. They're too cute.
Because the first time the food passes through their digestive system, it can't fully be absorbed. Oh. So they eat. It's not exactly poop, right? It's semi-digested food, which they eat again and chew on, and then they digest it a second time. So both rabbits and hyraxes do it. So they called it the land of hyrax because the rabbits they weren't familiar with reminded them of hyraxes. And the word for hyrax or rabbit is shafan.
Okay.
And so they called it Eretz HaShafan. In Hebrew, it would be Eretz HaShafan. In Phoenician, it was called probably something like Arad HaShafan or something like that, right? We don't know exactly. We have guesses of how they pronounced it. Like the show was probably something like maybe. In any event, and that's where you get the name Hispania. Hispania is Hashafan, the hyrax or the rabbit, the land of the rabbits. So the point is, these Tyrians were all over the world. That's important for understanding this prophecy, because he's talking about this superpower here. They build a fortress, and they have silver like dust and fine gold like mud in the streets. What are we talking about? There's some economic superpower, which is a trading superpower. It goes all the way to Ireland with their trade, and they have colonies as far away as Spain. The most famous colony of the Phoenicians, of the people of Tyre, was Carthage. And Carthage was known as New Tyre.
Oh, okay.
And when Tyre was finally conquered by Alexander the Great, they were cut off from actually, they were conquered by the Persians before that. When they were finally conquered, they were cut off from the colony of Carthage, of New Tyre, was cut off from the motherland, and it became an independent country, an independent city-state, and then it took over a lot of the Carthage took over a lot of the Phoenician colonies. And that's how Carthage became this great superpower in the Western Mediterranean that then later fought the Romans. And what made the Romans a great empire, what led to them becoming a great empire, was defeating Carthage. When they finally defeated Carthage, they then ruled Spain and southern France, and eventually they ruled what today is Tunisia, where Carthage was located.
Wow.
And actually the name for Carthage, the region in which Carthage was called, was Africa. That's what they called it, Africa, and that's what the Romans called it. The Phoenicians didn't call it Africa, and by the way, Africa didn't originally refer to the continent. It only referred to the area around Carthage.
Wow.
And it comes from the Hebrew, which is also Canaanite word afar, which is dust, the land of dust.
So much goes back to Hebrew.
Yeah.
So much goes back to Hebrew.
So Africa comes from the Hebrew word afar, which means dust, the land of the soil, the dust.